Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to BWTM Sports Gaming. So we're going to be talking about Joyce versus Oleksandr Usyk, or Oleksandr Usyk versus Joyce for the WBO interim world heavyweight title. This is an amazing matchup. I think, as you know, they fought as amateurs, and yeah, let's take it from there. Obviously, Joyce fought Usyk as an amateur. And Usyk basically outboxed and schooled Joyce at the time. And for me, ever since that fight, when you talk about Joyce's career, his detractors will always go to that Usyk fight. I don't know why, but they go to the Usyk fight. Oh, look what Usyk did to Joyce. And yeah, well, he did what he did in that fight, and that was quite a long time ago. Usyk has then since gone on to become undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, and has then fought guys. He fought Tony Bellew, moved up, fought Chas Witherspoon. He had the fight against Derek Chisora, and now he's going to fight Joyce. This, for me, is Oleksandr Usyk's biggest test of his career, by far. And I'll explain why in a moment. And these are just my initial thoughts, things that just come off the top of my head when I think about this fight. And then I look at Joyce. Now, I have to be honest, and Sam Jones, who is the manager of Joyce, knows at first I wasn't the biggest fan of Joyce. But the fight for me that turned the corner for me about Joyce is when he fought Bryant Jennings. Why Bryant Jennings? Because that was a guy I thought that would give Joyce problems, which he did, hit him to the body and hurt Joyce to the body. Bryant Jennings had fast hands, good footwork, able to move around the ring. I want to see how he did against a smaller guy that could move around the ring and use a nice jab on him and wasn't going to sit there and get hit by Joyce. And it was a good fight. It was a pretty good fight. I like the way when Joyce got hurt, he came back. But I also like Joyce's work rate in that fight. He threw a lot of punches in that fight, and he kept up with a guy that was significantly smaller than him, lighter than him, and himself has a very good engine. Bryant Jennings, say what you want about him, but he's always had a good work engine, good work ethic. He's always been coming into fight in shape. You know, he's always been what I call defensively responsible. A guy that's not just going to throw a whole heap of punches without thinking about it. Educate fighter. And that fight for me was a fight for, okay, this Joyce he's a lot more than just just very clumsy fighter or slow. And then I started seeing comparisons between him and George Foreman. The way George would just walk you to the ropes with a good educated jab, walk you to the ropes and just pummel you against the ropes. And I said, at that point, I started saying, Joyce is like, I didn't say he is, he's like George Foreman. People sometimes like to, I don't know, blow things up to be more than they actually are. Because when George Foreman had his career, if you remember, he was considered slow and plodding. And if you remember, Muhammad Ali himself called George Foreman a mummy. Today's mummy would probably be, if you're going to talk about mummy, Joyce, in the way he moves around. He's not athletic like a Tyson Fury, upper body movement, all that stuff. But he's trying to be looser. He's working at getting looser. Ishmael Salas has been a great addition to Joyce's team. He's also had Abel Sanchez as well. He's had some good trainers around him around the time to find what works with Joyce. And him and Sam Jones, who stuck by him, you know, they've tried to get in the fight with Chisora. It never happened. The thing happened with him and David Haye, but he still put on performances. He put on performances, you know. I remember watching Joyce up close and personal when I was at the Stavern fight. I was just Right. I was in the VIP section watching, right? So I was really close up that fight at the O2 Arena, watching Joyce. Not just Joyce throwing punches, but his distance. You know, how he was pulling his chin out of the way of punches, the way he was able to establish a jab and walk forward, you know, with really little to no care for what the other guy was doing. Very George Foreman-esque. Foreman would just walk forward at you, throwing a jab, looking to land a big right hand. He would land body shots. He'd just try and beat you up when you're on the ropes and just bully you with physical strength and intimidate you. And Joyce has got all those attributes. And let's be fair, Joyce should be a gold-winning Olympic champion as well. So Joyce is he has boxing ability, despite his detractors saying we're slow and he's ponderous and he's this and he's that. Now, he also knows how to fight to different game plans, which I've noticed with Joyce. His fight against, his recent fight against Daniel Dubois, he was able to just use the jab and stick behind the jab and stick to that game plan against Daniel Dubois. And just keep using the jab, working behind the jab, working behind the jab, working against a dangerous puncher, a guy that many people expected Daniel Dubois to knock Joyce out. But he showed his class as an Olympian. He showed his class using his jab, distance and timing. And a lot of the shots that Dubois was throwing, believe it or not, Joyce was pulling his chin out of the way of. Just swing, always rolling his shoulder. Joyce was using very good, again, boxing ability. And you have to really look up close to see what Joyce is doing. And it's little things like that you can see as Joyce is improving as a fighter. Works well to the body, works well to the head. Sneaky little shots to the body, you know, and can work at a frantic pace as well. That fight for me, for Joyce, was just confirming everything about Joyce. He's ready to be that world champion. He's ready to be at the world stage now, Joyce. Back to Oleksandr Usyk. I always look at fighters with momentum. When I look at Usyk as a heavyweight, he's had a stuttering career as a heavyweight. See, you look at the Tony Bellew fight, he did look impressive. He looked workmanlike against Tony Bellew. He went against Chaz Witherspoon. He looked workmanlike against Chaz Witherspoon. And against Derek Chisora, he looked workmanlike against Derek Chisora. This is Derek Chisora, a guy with 9 losses, who a lot of people say, oh, we're going to see the best of Oleksandr Usyk. And I hear a lot of people talking about, you haven't seen the best of Oleksandr Usyk. No, we've seen the best of Oleksandr Usyk. I don't think at Usyk's age, with the injuries, plus his team, that's the thing. Who's educating Oleksandr Usyk now? Who's training Oleksandr Usyk now? See, when people compare Usyk to Evander Holyfield, but some key things Evander Holyfield did when he moved up to heavyweight, he knew that fighting against the bigger guys, he couldn't just stand toe-to-toe with them. He did. But there were other things Evander Holyfield did as well. He went and brought in a ballet coach to work with footwork, right? Now, Usyk, as talented as he is as a cruiserweight, and you think about all the fights he's had as an amateur, as the pros, and the injuries he's had, extensive injuries, arm injury, elbow injury, arm injury, fist injury, hand injury, all these injuries that Usyk keeps having. And I can't see, and I'm still waiting for that great performance. And if people are going to dine out on that fight he had all those years ago against Joyce, then that would be foolhardy. It would be foolhardy because Joyce has developed so much more since then. You think about all the training he's had, and the training he's had, and the fights he's had as a heavyweight. Joyce is coming to his own now. And, you know, sometimes it takes time for a fighter to really understand who he is and have that self-belief. He may say, well, I can do these things, but you need to have that resume, almost those fights. And that Daniel Dubois fight was one fight. The Daniel Dubois fight and the fight he had against Bright Jennings and the Stavern fight. These are fights he had against good quality opposition. You know, guys who could punch, guys who could move. The guy who knocked down F.A. Ajagba, the same guy knocked down F.A. Ajagba that everyone's jumping up and down about, is a guy that Joe Joyce walked straight through. Walked straight through. This guy dropped F.A. Ajagba. That guy was no mug. I can't remember the gentleman's name again. He went straight through him. Joe Joyce has been able to fight internationally as well, go abroad and fight as well. Just like Usyk. Usyk's been able to fight around the world as well. Well, across Europe. Of course, he's fought in America. Usyk's toughest fight would be either against Breedis. Well, the three fighters. Look, the Breedis fight was a tough fight. The Hunter fight was a tough fight. The Chisora fight was a tough fight. The Tony Bellew was a tough fight. Right? Now, in none of those fights, you can say that Usyk dominated. He did well. He boxed well. But they were competitive against it. There was no sort of like Usyk blew them away. Or Usyk dominated them. You understand? And when I look at Joe Joyce now and I look at this Usyk fight, I expect to see that amateur scenario happen for a few rounds. I do expect that. But then I expect Usyk to begin to slow down. The work rate that Joyce is going to bring as a big man for 12 rounds, Usyk's going to have to move around the ring. And depending on the type of ring they have, this is going to be key. Depending on the type of ring they have, it could be a case of cat and mouse, basically Joyce chasing Usyk around the ring, or Usyk running away from Joyce. And I literally mean that. Because when Usyk tastes the power of Joe Joyce, Joyce has stunning power. And I believe Joyce may be behind 6, 7, 8 rounds, but he's going to work to the body, breaking Usyk down, hitting him with shots that he probably hasn't been hit with before, and breaking Usyk down. And this is where I believe Usyk needs a world-class trainer. And you will know the history of him and James Ali Bashir. I don't need to rehash all of that. In fact, I don't even want to talk about that because we know where we are now. Who is in that gym who's going to give Usyk the strategy? It won't just be enough for Oleksandr Usyk to use the skills he's got at the moment to beat Joe Joyce. It's not going to be enough. I'm telling you now, ladies and gentlemen, it won't be enough. Because if he thinks he can do what he's done against Tony Bellew, Derek Chisora, it won't. Because Joyce is going to walk straight through them punches, walk him down, unless Usyk's got the power to stop Joe Joyce in his tracks. Speed of punch is key. Yes. And maybe he can buzz Joyce with a combination. Now, Ali wasn't one of the hardest punchers in the world, but he had fast footwork and fast hands. It was the punch you don't see, the punch that hurts you. So if Usyk can somehow land a shot that Joyce doesn't see, then that's the only way. And buzz Joyce, that's the only way I can see Usyk getting through 12 rounds without getting hurt. But Joyce, he has one punch knockout power, and he's proven it. You understand? And look at that Brian Jennings fight. That's a key to how I see this fight going. Yes, Usyk's southpaw, and Usyk is more skilled than Brian Jennings. But I don't think Usyk is as defensively responsible as Brian Jennings. Jennings is a guy that hits and doesn't want to stick around, doesn't want to be in the kitchen for too long. Usyk will take his chances in the kitchen. And that is where there's a problem. You see, boxing for me is all about percentages. It's all about hitting and not getting hit. As Usyk has moved into the heavyweight division, he's become more and more hittable. So Derek Chisora nailed him, and he even admitted the lights went out on him in the second round against Derek Chisora. If the lights are going out you in the second round against Derek Chisora, God forbid what happens when Joe Joyce connects. And Joe Joyce will connect. And it's a lot different between then, in those amateur days, and now. There's 12 rounds. There's 12 rounds. And in one of them 12 rounds, Joe Joyce is going to catch up with Oleksandr Usyk. He is. He's going to catch up with him. I expect him to work the body, slow Usyk down. Now imagine Usyk slow down, can't move around the ring like he does, because his movement is key for Usyk. Slow Usyk down, break the body, slow him down. And you see how patient Joyce is with the Dubois fight. Break him down and then go to work. And Joyce is going to press Usyk. We know what Joyce can do. He can fight at a frantic pace. We know he can fight for 12 rounds, throwing loads of punches. We know that. We know that. When you look at a fight like David Tua and Ike Ibuchi, the president, where they threw all those punches. I expect that type of a fight. And that's the only way I believe Joe Joyce wins this fight. I don't believe Joe Joyce wins this fight by simply outboxing Oleksandr Usyk. I believe he's got to press Usyk from the start, since the bell goes ding ding. As soon as the bell goes ding ding, Joyce has got to be out of the trap. Bam! Straight onto Usyk. Straight onto him. Let him know straight away. Whacking body shots. And, you know, the jab, slipping to the body. Occasional right hands, but to the body. Really investing in that body. Really digging into that body. Round after round after round. Just pressing Usyk. Pressing Usyk. Yeah, you might be round down 4, 5, 6 rounds. Don't worry about that. Keep pressing Usyk. And then looking to stop Usyk in the later rounds. Like 9, 10, 11 and 12. You know, I don't think Usyk... You've got to look at Usyk for what he is, not how we expect him to be. And I think there's an expectation of Usyk to be something that I don't think he's ever going to be. Because if he was going to be it, we would have seen it already. We would have seen it in Chaz Witherspoon fight. We would have seen it in Derek Chisora fight. And I don't believe that fighters are leaving it till the best night that he'll suddenly show us something he hasn't shown us. This is Oleksandr Usyk, and I believe this is the best Oleksandr Usyk we're going to get, unless he brings in a quality trainer. I'm not knocking the trainer he has now, but I just think he has to invest in footwork, distance and timing. He has to be able to control the range with Joe Joyce, and I don't think his current administration are good enough to help him with this. And I think when you don't invest in your training camp and you don't invest, this is what happens. And I really believe that Joe Joyce will invest, and I don't believe Usyk will invest. You know, this is where I think it's going to hurt him. I really do. Because I don't think Usyk has improved as a fighter. I think Usyk's doing the same thing fight after fight after fight and getting away with it, because the level of opposition so far have been unable to capitalize on Usyk's mistakes. You look at Joe Joyce and he's invested. He's invested in Ishmael Salas. He invested with Abel Sanchez. He invested with Adam Booth. He invested. He invested in himself. Even when others didn't believe in him, he's invested himself. And I think in this fight, you're going to see the investment pay off. So I'm all with Joe Joyce. I'm all with Joe Joyce. And I'm looking to see Joe Joyce more and a Foreman-like fight, where he just keeps coming forward with a hard jab in Usyk's face, just moving forward, just, you know, non-stop, like a man possessed, and just working Usyk's body and causing a stoppage. That's how I see the fight. You know, Usyk's gonna get hurt in this fight. Make no mistake about it. He's getting hurt in this fight. It's just, you know, I don't think Usyk's gonna really. I mean, you think about it for a second. Usyk's current team. I mean, you just paint this into your brain a second. His team. Usyk didn't know the size of the ring until fight night when he was fighting Derek Chisora. He didn't know that information. What kind of a team does that? You turn up to arena the night of the fight and then realize what sort of ring it is. He's lucky it's Derek Chisora. So, and it's stuff like that that is very concerning for me when you look at Oleksandr Usyk. Yes, he's a talent. Yes, he's an undisputed cruiserweight champion. Yes, he's talented and he's a southpaw. But what makes him stand out? What makes Usyk so special? Now, what has he done since being the undisputed cruiserweight champion as a heavyweight? Has he shown devastating punching power? No, he's got 9-10 losses. He was out on his feet in about the 7th or the 8th round. Usyk couldn't finish him off. So I don't know if Usyk's got stamina problems as well late in the fight. If he's got stamina issues, Oleksandr Usyk, which Joyce hasn't shown. If Oleksandr Usyk's got stamina issues and he had it against Derek Chisora, again, that's a concern. How does Usyk win the fight? He's got to try and replicate what he did in the amateurs for 12 rounds, which is don't stay in the pocket, throw a combination and slip to the sides against Joyce. Use his better footwork and move Joyce around the ring. Literally, make Joyce miss, make him pay, and keep it moving. Don't allow Joyce to set in this fight. Don't allow Joyce to set his feet and land them big shots. That's how Usyk's got to win this fight. Can he do it for 12 rounds? I have my doubts. But if he can do it against a real world-class big man, a real world-class big man that is of Olympic pedigree and doesn't know how to lose. You understand? This is a different level. An Olympic pedigree champion who doesn't know how to lose, who's got a point to prove, who has thunderous power, who has a good training camp, a good team behind him, and he's just coming into his own. And he's come off a career best win against Daniel Dubois. Now people say, oh, well, he was behind that fight against Daniel Dubois. We can all bring excuses up afterwards. The bottom line is that Dubois, if you look at the Dubois fight, he was so discouraged by Joyce. You look at that fight. Joyce started to take control of the fight, I thought. And I could see in the round before, Dubois went back to the corner. He was gassing and he was hurt. He went back to the corner and I could see Joyce was actually starting to open up on him. Joyce, another thing, has got gears. If you watch Joyce, he fights in gears. He can fight. I want you to look at the Michael Wallace fight. That's another fight you want to look at, where Joyce is actually sparring with Michael Wallace. And then suddenly it's like, right, go out there, finish him off. You could see the different gears. Sparring with Michael Wallace is right, get him out there. And then goes boom, boom, and then Wallace is on the floor. So I've seen Joyce fight in different gears. I haven't seen those gears for Oleksandr Usyk as a heavyweight. It's all right to overwhelm guys with punches when you're the bigger guy. It's all right to overwhelm punches when the guys you're fighting can't hurt you. It's all right to overwhelm guys where the guys are not as good as you technically or haven't got the pedigree to capitalize on your mistakes. Now you're in with a real big man who's there, who's coming to knock your block off and doesn't care about your reputation, doesn't care about your training camp, doesn't care about you undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, doesn't care about Derek, doesn't care about any of that. This man is on a mission to destroy. You understand? And you're dealing with a different mindset there. So I don't know, unless Usyk makes significant changes to his team and his camp, he's in serious trouble. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section. By the way, check this out.